There's been a lot of stuff in the Book of Boba Fett for Jabba fans to like, and I should probably do one or more videos about breaking all that stuff down at some point, but as a Jabba fan, the appearance of two live-action Hutts in the form of the twins was definitely one of the high points. And this is the first time we've seen any Hutt in live action since The Phantom Menace in 1999, so it's a pretty big deal. And while they are CG and not practical puppets, as a lot of people might have preferred, I still think they did a pretty good job with them. They ride into town on a litter carried by humanoids, even though some kind of hover transport would almost certainly be more comfortable, because it's a show of power. They've given them individual personalities that are immediately recognizable, so the male twin apparently uses a furry creature like a hoojib or something to mop off his sweat, while his sister uses a fan to talk discreetly to her brother, which I find rather comical. As of the making of this video, they've only released 5 out of 7 episodes of the series, so I don't know if they're going to be making another appearance or not, but even if they don't, it's been a pretty cool addition for Hutt fans like myself, and I hope that someplace like Hasbro or Disney will be coming out with merchandise for these characters as well. But in the meantime, good old Desert Octopus has already come up with a 3D model for these characters. In fact, he sent me a preliminary shot of the models for the Hutts just minutes after I finished watching the first episode where they appeared, which is really impressive to me. So in today's video, we're going to be 3D printing and painting them. So just to introduce the models real quickly, they're available on Cults 3D, just like all of Desert Octopus's models, and they're split up into 2 sort of bundles. You get one with the Hutts themselves, and then one with their litter and the humanoid carriers for the litter. Now, these are all scaled to 3 3/4 inch scale, just like all of Desert Octopus's stuff. But the thing is, this litter and also the bodies of the Hutts themselves are quite large, and they are too big, in fact, to fit on even my largest resin 3D printer. Here you can see it in relation to the size of the Elegoo Saturn, which is my largest printer. So I decided, instead of trying to print it in sections or maybe print it on a filament printer, which would take a long time, I would do it in half scale because, as it turned out, the litter fit exactly at half scale on my Elegoo Mars 3's build plate. And I thought that was pretty cool. I've done half scale vintage Star Wars figures in the past, and they've been kind of popular. I like that scale myself, so that's what I decided to go with. That meant scaling the litter bearers to half scale as well, which meant I could fit them all 12 or 13, depending on how you want to count them, there on one build plate, which I thought was pretty cool. These litter bearers are kind of made of 2 or 3 bodies and then interchangeable heads to kind of, make them have a little bit of variety without having them all be completely unique. And here they are after printing. They printed just fine. And this whole thing, all 13 or so figures, only took about an hour and a half to print, which I was pretty impressed with. So here are all the parts, just very generally grouped. We have the Hutt brother and sister. We have the litter that they ride on and the various parts for that litter. And then we have the slaves or the litter bearers, who are the humanoids that carry them. And yeah, it's a lot of parts to assemble. I did print almost everything in just gray, regular resin, but I decided to print things like this, and especially, really it was this that I was concerned about. Print this in ABS-like resin because it's so thin. I wanted to make sure it had a little give to it and it wouldn't just immediately snap, if I put a little pressure on it. So hopefully this will work. These are the rods that the litter bearers use to carry the litter. What we're going to do is try and assemble this at least part way, and then go ahead and paint them, and then I guess do the final assembly. So we'll go ahead and do that. I would say the parts fit together relatively well considering they've been resized like this. I didn't have to do anything too drastic, although there was a little bit of trimming and sanding, filing, I guess I should say, that I cut out here, but it was relatively painless. And the same is true with this, the litter. This is the first time I've actually used super glue activator, which seems crazy to me because it's very useful. You just spray it on one surface and then put the glue on the other one, and it kicks in about 8 seconds as opposed to having to sit there for maybe a minute or longer. So I'm definitely going to be using that moving forward. I did have a little bit of trouble getting the poles that hold up the litter to fit inside the holes, which is not really surprising because they've been resized. So I just took a little drill bit and used it by hand to just slightly open up the hole a little bit more, and also sanded down parts of the poles and got them in there without too much trouble. Once I had the Hutts and their litter assembled, I moved on to their humanoid slaves or litter bearers, and they were a little bit challenging. It's not unusual for these half-scale vintage figures to be a little bit difficult, but I did have a little bit of trouble assembling them in some cases, and regardless, there's so many of them that it was kind of daunting, but I did manage to get them all assembled, and you kind of have to figure out which parts go where. They have certain arm positions that will go on certain parts of the litter there, certain sides of it. The biggest problem I had, though, was that there was no way I could get them to actually hold up the litter. I tried for a while, and it may be different if I were to print these full size because they would have more weight and they'd act as more of a base for the litter, but they just would fall apart immediately every time I tried to get them to stand up. So it was at this point that I decided I would design and filament 3D print a simple base for these guys. So this is what I came up with in Tinkercad. It took me all of 3 minutes probably. It's just a rectangle with rounded corners, and then I put a hole in the middle to receive an acrylic rod that I would use to support the litter. And here is the base after printing it in gray filament, and it's, I think, just about the right size there. I decided I would actually glue the feet of these figures to the base as opposed to trying to use magnets or some other way of attaching them. I'm sort of thinking of these figures as part of the base. And here's the acrylic rod, or actually this is a longer one that I'm going to be using, but you can see I'm going to be putting that in the bottom there, cut it off, and then the litter will just be resting lightly on top there. I won't even attach it to the litter, and that'll keep most of the weight off of those flimsy rods. The hardest part of this really was figuring out where to glue all these guys down so that they could actually hold the rods. You know, they have to be in the correct position. After that, I took the acrylic rod and scored it in the middle and was able to then just snap it in half with my hands. So here we have the parts all assembled more or less, and as you may be able to see if you look closely, I had to reposition all of the slaves because I messed them up and had everything kind of off to one side by about a half an inch or a quarter of an inch or something. It looked bad, so I decided to redo it, even though it was a little painful. But yeah, now they're basically in the positions that I want them in. So what I'm going to do is take these off. I haven't glued them down or anything like that. Put them aside for priming. I'm going to have to get this off of here. I'm going to paint it separately. It's going to be a little bit tricky, but it should be doable without breaking anything, one would hope. Okay. They're just kind of holding on to it. There we are. And you can see there's the acrylic rod that was resting right on the bottom of here so that it would hold the majority or basically all of the weight of the litter, and we wouldn't have any potential problems with droopage over time with these rather flexible poles. So what I'm going to do is take this as well to prime. But before we prime this part, well, I'm going to take this off first because I want to I want to keep this clear. I think what I'm going to do is put another piece of acrylic in here just to plug up the hole and make sure it doesn't get anything in it until I'm ready to insert the actual one. But what I want to do before I prime this is to put a little mixture of sand and glue on the base to give it a sandy look, and also to cover up all these places where I accidentally put the feet down in the wrong positions, because that doesn't look so great. Also, we have a 3D printed texture here on the base, so all that we're going to try and cover with a little bit of sand to make it look appropriately Tatooine-like. This is basically the same approach to the base that I used in the Bomar Monk video recently, and also in the Probe Droid video from a while back. You just mix sand and glue in an appropriate seeming ratio and smear it across the top. Alright, now that the sand here is all dry, all I have to do is prime these and start painting. I'm going to try a new method of priming that I've seen some YouTubers use. We'll see if it works for me. Hey, it really worked. That's pretty cool. Anyway, I just have to paint these now, but I'm going to have to apologize ahead of time because I don't have full footage of me painting these. I'll show you a little bit of what I was doing. But I kind of got fed up partway through. I was having trouble getting them to come out the way that I wanted them. I had to repaint a couple of things multiple times, and I just decided to stop filming it because it was kind of getting in my way and it was frustrating. But I'll give you a little bit of a taste of what I was doing. One thing that was a little frustrating as I was painting this was that it was kind of difficult to tell what color anything was actually supposed to be. I decided to go with a sort of reddish-brown color for the litter, but I'm not entirely sure if it's supposed to be that or if it's maybe a metallic color. It was difficult to see. And the same is true with the Hutts to some degree. I went with a combination beige and pinkish purple for the female and beige and green for the male, but I had a lot of trouble getting it to come out the way that I wanted to, and I ended up completely repainting her about 4 times, which was pretty frustrating. And that brings us to today's sponsor, Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of classes on a wide variety of topics, from fine art to photography, business, and self-improvement. There are no ads, and they're adding new premium classes all the time, so you're sure to find something that you like. After finding myself frustrated during the painting process, I decided to see what Skillshare had to offer in the realm of relaxation. And I ended up taking the class Relaxation Breathing Meditation by Zachary Phillips. In this short class, he explains the connection between the mind and the body and introduces some simple ways to use breathing to calm yourself down when you're under stress. And I'll have to say, it really did make me feel more relaxed. If you'd like to give Skillshare a try, the first 1,000 people to click the link in the video description will get a free month of full access to Skillshare. Thanks again to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. And here we have the final piece. I'm not, if I'm totally honest, completely satisfied with the paint job on this. Mostly the litter bearers here, just not quite as detailed as I would have liked. I did struggle a lot with painting them. Well, I mean, 13 individual tiny figures is a lot to do, but also I had some trouble with the Hutts themselves. Here we have the female. I did eventually settle upon this paint scheme, which I'm relatively happy with in terms of the coloration and everything. I think it's not a bad match for what we see on screen, but I went through about 4 different versions where I repainted her over and over, trying to get something that I thought was acceptable, so it was a little frustrating. And then I went on to do her brother, and I basically just sort of used the same technique except with different colors, green instead of the pinkish purple. So this one was not as hard, but there he is with his little hoojib or whatever he's got there. Pretty cool. I like the way they fit together in a yin-yang symbol like that. There we are. So we can take a little bit closer look, I guess. As I say, not super happy with the level of detail I achieved here on these humanoid figures, but generally speaking, your attention will be going to the Hutts themselves, so they're just sort of part of the background, I guess. You can see the acrylic rod there in the bottom supporting the litter, which I think probably was a good idea because although they're being supported, at many points around the whole base, I don't entirely trust thin resin printed pieces like this not to bend over time. We can take a look at the back real quick. There they are. And the base, well, nothing special. Did what I wanted it to do, which is, you know, keep these in place and look appropriate. So I guess I'm pretty happy with how this turned out overall. You know, you got to keep in mind that the size of this is so small. In person, it looks actually quite good, but when you're blowing it up on a TV screen or something like that, it can look a little rough. Since I didn't, you know, glue these down to the litter, I thought I would take my vintage Kenner Jabba and put him here. This is the one that I made in a previous video at half scale. He actually fits right there pretty well. We can put Salacious Crumb in front of him there too. There we are. Well, I hope you enjoyed this look at my attempt to do justice to Desert Octopus's Hutt Twins model, and I hope you're enjoying the Book of Boba Fett. I generally speaking, am enjoying it quite a bit, especially the more recent episodes. There have been a couple where it's a little bit shaky, but yeah, it's definitely cool to have new Star Wars and new stuff set in Jabba's palace. Never thought that would actually happen, so I'm pretty stoked about it. Thanks for watching. This video was brought to you with the help of my patrons from Patreon. I'm very grateful for their support. People like Angelica Brady and these Palace VIPs have been invaluable as I make these videos for you. If you'd like to also support the channel for as little as $1 a month, you can click the link in the video description and check it out on Patreon.